Mike. First of all, I want to do my thank yous because I think that's the most important part. I want to thank Molly for bringing this, my work, to the Bancroft community and her whole team that supports it, the hanging, this opening. I really appreciate it. And as an artist, just to have your work accepted is a great vote of confidence, so I thank Molly. I also thank Barbara Fitzpatrick and Richard and Eleanor Yipchuk for sponsoring it. It really inspires me. I think, what else can I do in my communities to support the arts? It's an amazing thing to do. And I'd like to thank each one of you, because in my mind as an artist, a piece of art is not really a piece of art, it's a potential. And the potential exists just like a musical score or a seed. And it reaches its full potential when you look at it and it exists in your mind as the seed germinates and the musical score resounds. So thank you for coming out to support art. I really appreciate it. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the art, just to maybe give you some context to open it up for questions if you want to ask me about the art. Art is difficult. For me, each piece exists in a huge dialogue, which is my career as an artist. I'm always talking and communicating and thinking about the art. So for me, the art exists as a continuum, a dialogue. And what you're seeing here is parts of what I would say a play. I think of it as a play with 3 acts. And you're seeing parts of Act 2 and 3. So I'll kind of talk about the journey and the performance that my art has performed so far. Act 1 began years and years ago, probably 40 years ago, and it began with my love of line, Matisse, and drawing. I would take small little pieces of black and white imagery, collage them down, and take my graphite and eraser and try to merge those images into one cohesive whole. And I brought one piece because I thought it's not fair to talk about it and not show it. They were all small, little black and white pieces of collage with drawing on them that integrated the pieces into one cohesive whole. And what was I doing at that time in my life? I was an elementary school teacher. And what was I doing? I was taking all these little children and trying to form them into a cohesive, cooperative group. I knew that what I needed to do to help learners was to help them make connections. And they needed to connect what they knew to new information that I was imparting to them. So for example, if they could understand place value, 123, and they knew it was 100. It was 2 10s and a 3. Very easily I could move them to understanding the metric system. That hundreds unit is just the meter, guys. The 23 is the centimeter. And so my goal in education was constantly to make connections. And I spent my whole teaching career working on collages like that, working on connecting things. Act 2 began when we moved to the Kawartha Lakes area, and my partner Pat and I bought an old church. And he looked at the walls and he said to me, Elayne, if we live here, you're gonna have to go big. Those things aren't gonna make it. And I also knew that I would have to go into color, and that scared me a bit. And those years were very busy. I was working full time. We were changing a church, which was a church until the time we bought it, into a residence, into a studio, into a music space for my partner. We had a yard that was a parking lot to turn into a yard with landscaping. So I didn't do a lot of work, but I definitely collected. And I thought, what could I collage? And I found playing cards, and I found maps, and I found wrapping paper, and I found old newspapers. I found so many things that I squirreled away. And as I looked towards the end of my teaching, and I thought, I need to make this transition to art, which I know in my soul I'm an artist, and I've always teaching is art. I was forming students, but I wanted to move to visual art. And I needed a place to do that. Not a physical space, but a mental space. And so 5 or 6 years ago, I began to get up in the morning, and the first thing I would do is go for a walk. And I soon realized that that helped because I wasn't in the house looking around going, I should wash this floor. Oh my gosh, I need to do a load of laundry. Those windows should be washed. All of that left. I went out, and all I was looking at was trees and nature, and my brain was with me. That's all I took with me. And so I'd come back and I'd have ideas, and I started to work. So that time, I'm making the transition, thinking about how can I transition from teaching to artwork, and I started collaging. And what started coming out related to both the pathways I was walking on and also this transition I was making. These images that were pathways started coming out. And I think of this one in the corner. I'll just move over here. This one called In the Garden, is that image kept repeating itself over and over in my work. And to me, it kind of speaks to the pathway of work, which was very safe. It was always the same thing. It's kind of like a walking mandala. I would continue, get up at 7, I'd make my lunch, I'd go to work, I'd come back. But where was I going to go from there? So this image kept coming up in my work over and over. And as I continued working, they became more path-like and radiating off. And this one that's over here, also, it's really, I call it crossroads and intersection. It really is an intersection of my teaching and my art career. And it really, so life informs my art. And it was funny, I said to Pat on the drive up, I said, I don't know who's leading the way, me or the art, but I think it's a real symbiotic relationship. Then there was ones like this one over here. This one, as I'm navigating which paths I'm going to take, I lost both my parents. Chaos, and you can see in that image. So that was Act 2 of my art performance. Act 3 began when I took a trip to Italy. I took a trip to Italy, and I'm going to move over here. And I was really intrigued when I went to Pompeii, and this one is called Pompeii, when I saw the tiles that were on the ground of some of the villas. But the tiles, obviously over time, some had been destroyed, and there was parts where plaster was filled in between the tiles. The tiles weren't there. And that was percolating in my mind. I came home and I knew I had this big 4-foot by 4-foot piece that I hated, that I didn't know what to do with. And as a collage artist, what do you do with a canvas that's not working? And so what I did is I volunteered for a film festival, and I got all the posters that were left over. I plastered them all over this piece. Then I took it out to the shop. I took the belt sander to it and started sanding down. Then I went to an orbital sander, and then I went to my little mouse sander for details. And that started my work on décollage, or decollage, which is Act 3. But at the same time, I'm doing my day collage and my regular collage, working in my studio, listening to the radio, which I like to do, and we all know what happened in 2020. COVID hit, and this came out of me. This one, and this one. I'm listening to Trump. I'm listening to COVID. I'm listening to the Ottawa, the rally in Ottawa, and I'm thinking, what is happening? And the only thing going through my brain is William Butler Yeats. I don't know if you know this poem. The Second Coming, turning in a widening gyre. The falcon cannot see the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. What's the next one? Blood loose tide. Can't remember. The tide is loosed. The crimson tide washes away the innocence. It's not quite this line, but I love the last lines. The strong lack all conviction, and the innocent are full, and the wicked are full of passionate intensity. And it really felt like that. We had these intense people, and so coming out with their voices, just demanding stuff. And I continued to listen to the radio, continued on the course of day collage as I'm thinking about everything that our democracies around the world that seem to be eroding. I'm thinking about how our environment is in trouble. And my day collage kind of, for me, culminates in this piece, which is called The Beauty and the Horror, in which I was thinking about, oh my gosh, the things that humans have created. It's magnificent, it's beautiful, it's astonishing what we have done as humans. It's unbelievable, but it's also horrific. And some of the things we're thinking about now, when we think about things like Black Lives Matter, we think about the Indigenous children, and we think about our environment and our wildlife, some of that has had horrific results. And so that was in my mind, circling around as I did that piece. So that's kind of what's happened in the course of this, of the work on the wall. It's the collage and the day collage. So day collage means to take things off of the paper, which I feel we're doing. We're taking away what's not working for us right now, but what's going to remain. There's a lot of beauty to be left and to remain. So that's my kind of introduction to my work, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the work or particular pieces, so I'll leave it up to you if you have any questions.
How did you come up with the title, Inside Out?
Oh, the title Inside Out. Thank you so much for reminding me. Outside In. That is related, yeah. That's related to how I found walking, and I found that I need to be outside to bring myself inside to be able to create and think. So that's integral to my practice. I used to think it was drawing, but now I realize what's integral to my practice is the headspace and just being outside to find it. That's where it came from. Thanks, Matt. Didn't know that. Yeah.
I look at this piece, for example, on the right-hand side. I'm puzzled as to how you even start that. You take a series of layers that are uniformly across the whole thing, or do you sort of instinctively say, I want to place a certain pattern here and another pattern there, and you go back to your sander and actually start removing it and saying, I like this pattern, I don't like this pattern? Perhaps you could just explain a little on that.
Sure, thank you. A lot of the pieces were created, like Pompeii, over top of pieces I didn't like. So I went into my studio, the one right beside you called Subtext, that's very much a piece I didn't like. And so I would use a piece that I didn't like as the foundation, for it. And some of them are created without any foundation. So this was created just with materials. There's no underlying piece. But this is using a lot of different materials that I like. I'll tell you some of them I can see that I like. I like old wrapping paper. Wrapping paper has really neat designs and colors in it, and it's hard sometimes to find things with colors. What I found with decollage is when you old paper, the ink is saturated all the way through. This paper is more porous, but our modern paper has a thin layer coating on either side. So the color actually just sits on the top, and it doesn't permeate the middle of the paper. So that when you start sanding, you get a lot of white, and white is the center of the paper. So I have to be careful when I sand, but this one was more random, but I knew I wanted some central color and radiating out from that. So this one, I just took a whole bunch of papers that appealed to me that I thought color-wise and palette-wise worked together. I piled them up, and there's a few things I've learned along the way. One of them is if I can crumble the paper, I get these lines. Once it's glued down and firmed, when I sand it, it forms these lines. So there's little things that as I work, I've learned. But I did multiple layers. There's probably 6-8 layers on there. And as I sand, different layers get exposed. And you can see over here on the edges, that's how it looks after I decollage it. And then I take a pen and I've added ink over, I've traced all the different components within that decollage. And so some of them I do that. This one you can see I didn't. Pompeii I didn't. But some works to me want more definition to pull it out. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
For this?
Yeah.
What kind of glue?
Oh, for the glue, I'm using gel medium. Gel medium is acrylic paint with no pigment in it. So it acts as an adhesive.
So one other question, as you're progressing through the work, if you find you need to add color because it hasn't worked, would you then go back and actually add another layer to create even more depth to it?
Yeah, I have done that. I have gone over and I've sanded it down and I'm not happy, and I've done another 3 layers and sanded it down again. Sometimes I have one work and I think it's still in the studio in the corner that I've probably done that 5 times, and I just think I just want to pitch it. But I've also learned that sometimes I can find the pieces working, but there's one area that's not. So I can collage that area and just rework that area. But I try to do all of that before I go to the pen work.
Do you always sand down?
In the decollage, yes. So decollage, typically people just ripped it off, right? And so you have this raggedness to it, right? And I don't know why I came to the sander. I guess maybe just because he's got a beautiful shop with lots of tools, which also reminds me of.
He's burned out the sander.
He's got a couple of jacks.
Ruined.
He's not mad. He's mad at me. But it's all for the sake of art.
Oh,
Which
so-
also reminds me of the pieces over here. I'll just behind Mary here, which is Pat inspired too. I did these pieces and I said, oh, I really need something here for the sky. So I went out to the shop, and this is actually, is it tie then?
Tie power.
It's tie power.
Yeah.
And I use that for the sky, and I love how it's got lines. It's like drawing it, just so delicious. So I will collage anything. I have no qualms about pasting anything down.
Those are
Yeah.
cool. Looks like grasses.
It looks like that. Well, these ones, one of the other things that's really,
This is not typeware though.
Yeah.
it is, it's
Yeah.
tie bar.
That's the
didn't know
flip
it was
side.
so
It's the flip side.
Like
Yeah.
coconut.
It's the flip
fiber.
side of it.
Side,
yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. But these pieces, we're kind of inspired by another thing that's changing in our world, and that's our view of it. For years and years, we've looked at landscape straight on in a horizontal way. But now we have satellite images and GPS images. We see our landscapes from above and drones. We also, the GPS is a really interesting one for me, how the whole world radiates from me. I am the center here, and it all goes out from me. So how our landscape is changing and how we view the landscape is really interesting to me. And I was kind of investigating some of that, when I did those pieces.
A question of collage versus decollage. Collage, you're looking at the image, it's growing in front of you, you take something and you add it to the creative process. With the narrative process, you don't necessarily remember what's underneath there.
Sometimes, well, some decollages like these are taken with nothing underneath. This one was a fully realized piece. And when you look at it, you can see some of the collage poking through, right? So in that case, sometimes I'll take a photograph of the piece and mark it on the back where the top is, so that when I'm decollaging, when I go to sand, I know what's underneath and I know what's there. So that I can find it and expose it if I want to. But I find that the decollage is much more random to me. It's a kind of, I have to trust.
Yeah.
Trust myself and trust that the art knows what it's doing. Probably more so than me.
Anyone else?
So what's the source material for these collages? You've got
Well,
you repeat a lot of things, right?
yes. So it's hard sometimes to find materials where I can take a repeated image out of it. There's one of my favorites that's in almost every piece that I create. Here's one of them, and it's this little blue and silver wrapping paper. And it had a nice fibrous back, so it glues really well. I use that. There's playing cards here. These are just random different cardboards, like scrapbooking material. We've got obviously maps, and atlases are all over the place in secondhand stores because they're getting rid of them. I've been gobbling them up like crazy. Old newspapers, I love the patina of it. But it's anything I can find. Recently somebody gave me her father's old passports, and I'm so excited to use that paper. So I will use
Travel.
anything that I can find, anything that's appealing and has a pattern that I'm interested in. And I love this. I use this over and over again. It's an old book with that beautiful papery, powdery paper. I just love it. It glues beautifully. So I get excited about it. I'm sorry.
It's the glue.
Oh no. Back to that.
What about, do you want to talk about UV protection?
Well, so at the end, I varnished them all to add another layer of UV protection. I did some of my pieces, the first big pieces like this, I did on matte board, and I framed them. But I had this desire to liberate them from the frame so that you could really see the paper and be up close to them. I didn't want the glass layer between you and the work. So that's changed too. Thank you. Just want to remind everybody that